So, welcome everyone to the presentation of January 3rd, 2022 by presented and hosted by Rudolph Steiner Branch of Chicago. And today we are very lucky to have Andrew Linnell here with us, and he will be speaking about breathing Raphael's Madonnas. Andrew Linnell lives near Boston, Massachusetts, and he studied art history under William Mann at Emerson College in Sussex, England. After over 40 years in the computer industry, he co-founded Mistech a couple years after retirement. His days are filled with active involvement in Mistech study groups, the nature science section, and as administrator to several Facebook groups where he aims to bring anthroposophy to where it can be found online. He is married, the father of 3 children, and the author of 2 children's books, plus 2 art history books and several Mistech study guidebooks. Now, Andrew today is going to be accompanied by Kristen Vasques, who lives in Northern Ohio. And she studied at the Waldorf Teacher Training Institute in Detroit from 1974 to 1976. Her main interests are art, music, and travel. Kristen lived in Florence for 5 months in 1974, just before starting at the Waldorf Institute. Her travels also included 2 trips to Egypt and a 3-week trip to Kathmandu in Nepal. Kristen will be playing a small 16-string lyre harp made by one of the Marini family members, a Mennonite family in Pennsylvania. So I welcome everybody. I am Mary Spalding. I am the president of the Rudolph Steiner Branch in Chicago, and I have been basically asked by Andre to host today. He has been putting together this whole program for the Holy Nights and has done an incredible job. He is part of our council and a longtime council member and could not be here today. So here I am, and I have not done this nearly as much as him, but I hope that I will do Andrew's program service. And I'm really happy that you all have been able to join us. And so just one other thing I wanted to say is because of some of the Zoom bombing, I guess I will say, that happened at the very beginning of the Holy Nights to the branch. We have ended up putting everybody on just no cameras. And so we will have a time for question and answer at the end, and I will have you all unmute at that time for your question and answer session. And then at the very end, you can unmute and say hello to everybody. So without any further ado, I'm going to say welcome, Andrew, and please get going. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mary, for that warm introduction. I also want to express my appreciation to your Chicago branch for hosting these wonderful Holy Night celebrations. You know, by hosting these online, you have enabled a worldwide audience. One could say that it's a new form of community emerging. Last year during the Holy Nights, I gave a talk here entitled A Birth Among Ruins, where I focused on Botticelli's paintings. Today, for those of you who were here last year or yesterday, we got a sample of Renaissance art with another Andrew, namely Andrew Wolpert's of England. In addition to Raphael, he also used the works of Botticelli, Fra Angelico, Michelangelo, and Leonardo. In my talk today, I'll continue with a focus on this most remarkable young artist, Raphael, and his Madonna paintings. And I also want to say, I am thrilled to have Kristen Vasques join me today. And as you heard, she will play her harp during those sections of this talk when we display movement in a selected sequence of Raphael Madonnas. All Madonna paintings concentrate on the mother and child. Sometimes Joseph appears, sometimes John the Baptist. Raphael brings to his depictions a remarkable depth within simplicity. Foremost is the mood. Raphael feels this mood in his soul and wants to inspire us with it. One can say that the essential ingredient of his Madonnas is merely the interaction of mother and child, their interconnection. We might ask, what does the mother mean here? What was the mother to a tribe thousands of years ago, and then to a bloodline? Or we might ask, to Mother Earth. These are both by Raphael. On the left, we see Madonna of Loreto, circa 1509, and on the right, Madonna and Child with Book from about 1502. Keep in mind the mood of a Madonna and Child is meant to be different from the mood of a nativity scene. Here we see Madonnas by two other painters who were contemporaries of Raphael. Here the mood is strikingly different. In this talk, I hope you will feel what is different about Raphael's Madonnas from those of other painters whose works you may have seen. What special quality did Raphael capture? These two examples are by Andrea Gianalo Di Francesco De Luca. Boy, these names, sorry if I'm butchering for those of you who speak Italian. I don't, obviously. So on our left, this is circa 1509, 1510, and it's found right near me in the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. And on the right is one by Giovanni Antonio Sagliani with Lorenzo de Credi, roughly 1510 and maybe as late as 1515. Although the backgrounds can be similar to those in a Raphael, the characters and especially the mood are remarkably different. This Madonna with Child and Parrots is from 1533 by Hans Baldung Grien, a Northern Renaissance painter. It was completed 13 or 14 years after Raphael had died. Note how both the child and Madonna show earthly countenances. This painting is part of the collection of the National Museum in Nuremberg. So have a look and look at the putti in the background. Popular in Raphael's time were nativity scenes where the child was born among ruins, the ruins not only of the Roman Empire, but the ruins brought about by the Black Plague. Artists felt how life, as it was then known, was leading only to ruins without some new direction, something new to enter through the incarnation of God into human life. As we heard last year, Botticelli painted several adorations, showing this birth as happening among ruins. This Botticelli adoration is also among ruins. The three magi have traveled with a large entourage. We see a very complex painting attempting to depict how Christ had come for every human being. Note how not only has our civilization that was built upon rocks come to ruin, but so has the earth itself. Note the rock areas in the foreground that could also be clouds, foretelling of the spiritualization of rock coming in the future. This, however, would not be a mood Raphael sought to portray in his Madonnas. It is historically interesting that Botticelli believed himself to be living during the Great Tribulation due to the establishment of Savonarola's theocracy in Florence amongst major upheavals throughout Europe. Savonarola was preaching that the time of Christ's millennium, as stated in the book of Revelation, had come. Thus, This painting has the inscription at the top that reads, "At the end of the year 1500, in the troubles of Italy, I, Alessandro, in the halftime after the time painted, according to this 11th chapter of St. John, in the second woe of the apocalypse, during the release of the devil for 3.5 years, then he shall be bound in the 12th chapter, and we shall see him buried as in this picture." So it's been called, after he painted it, not by Botticelli, Mystical Nativity. And you see both the shepherds and the kings in this one. So I want to bring your attention to what we'll call artistic imagination, and to say that this is the first step into seeing into higher worlds. Up to the 16th century, mankind still had a view regarding the spiritual world and its relationship to the earthly world, a view that depended on imagination, and that is imagination with a capital I. Imaginations were, in pre-Christian times, something with Platonic life. Raphael painted lively representations of soul experiences. Entering the 15th century, the view of the world image, was still something imaginative. But then with the 15th century came a major cultural change. Raphael's paintings express, you might say, a lively protest against the rise of materialism during his age. Raphael wanted to stand within beauty of which his cultural age no longer experienced as real. Rather, his age strove to find certainty in a despiritualized physical realm, and then to insert a sensible spirituality into this dead element. Raphael's aim was to depict spiritual images, import what he saw spiritually into this world via his paintings. Here we see a fresco from the study housing the library of Julius II, who was Pope. It has been called the Disputa, but early on it was known as the Adoration of the Sacrament. Also in this room are the Parnassus, the cardinal virtues, and the School of Athens, whose stories come from ancient Greece. In the Vatican, there are 3 additional rooms, each with 4 frescoes by Raphael. These frescoes depict the harmony perceived between Christian theology and Greek philosophy. In this fresco, we see the depiction of 3 realms, the earthly, the soul, and the spirit. In its cosmology, this image of Christianity's Trinity spans the earth, then the sun and its planets, and finally the fixed stars. What may be inwardly experienced by every human soul, irrespective of creed or confession, as the Trinity, clearly faces us in this painting. And the picture as a whole portrays the inwardness of the human soul in an expression of beauty reminiscent of that from ancient Greece. This dispute about the masses was meant to tie in with the other 3 frescoes of this room to depict Greek beauty of form and with its philosophical strivings. We see Raphael is quite capable of complex paintings. So you should be asking by now, who was this Raphael? Raffaello Sanzio da Urbino was born on Good Friday. That was the 6th of April, 1483. He appropriately bears the name of the archangel of healing, namely Raphael, He learned art as a child from his father, Giovanni Santi, who was also an artist. Then at 16, he apprenticed to Perugino, whose studio was in Perugia in Urbino. As a lad, Perugino's studies under Verrocchio in Florence had overlapped with Leonardo da Vinci. So Perugino and Leonardo were students together in Verrocchio's studio in Florence. Now, let me talk about these times. Noble families of Perugia spent their lives wrangling and quarreling. They fought bitterly against each other. One would drive the other out of town. Then after a short banishment, that other family would try again to take possession of the town. More than once, the streets of Perugia flowed with blood and were strewn with corpses. Raphael's youth was pervaded by a quarreling humanity, with disorder among disorder and battle upon battle. So we can say Perugino often then would venture out of Perugina and work out of Florence, and Raphael typically would join him. In his early 20s, and certainly by 1504, Raphael came to study under Leonardo da Vinci when Leonardo was back in Florence. It is important to feel the societal mood in Florence as well, and that would be Florence in 1504. It was a weary atmosphere following inner and outer wars and the tumult from Savonarola's theocratical rule of the city-state. At 25, Raphael was called by the Pope to Rome. Wherever he went, he was beloved by all, with one exception, and that was Michelangelo, who viewed him with suspicion. And I'll talk a little more about that later. I might remark that the papacy at this time had itself fallen far from the ideals of Christianity. It too was involved in family battles, battles to ensure one of the power family's sons would become the next pope, for there was much power in that position for family and friends. Not many years before Raphael, the Pope resided in France, and then there were two competing popes, and for a short while, even three. We ought to ask ourselves how such a soul could paint as he did under such dire circumstances, both in Florence and in Perugia, plus all the tensions he experienced within Rome. Certainly, we can say Raphael was not a product of his environment. Raphael, like St. Francis before him, could see the immorality within the church, but his art stayed true to an inner purpose. Oddly, he died on the Good Friday of 1520, which of course was also his birthday, April the 6th. He was only 37 years old. Just as Greek architecture had once attained a balance of spirit and earth, his era was the time when painting also would do so. Realistic perspective had met spiritual feeling. Leonardo, Michelangelo, and Raphael each led a generation to a new peak of Renaissance art. So now I will stop speaking for a while and let the following Madonna images speak for themselves. While you take in these 15 images, Kristen is going to play Christmas music on her harp. We'll go through these images twice. The first trip at about 7 seconds per slide, and then a second pass, which will be a lot slower, or about 20 seconds per image. And ask yourself what mood each engenders in you. What feelings are called forth? And look for movement in these images. So, Kristen? Thank you, Kristen. Wonderful.
Welcome.
That was perfect. Kristen will play for us one more time after we get a chance to discuss, or I will take you through a discussion of these Raphael works in a little bit more depth. Here we see Raphael's Madonna with the fish, painted between 1512 and 1514. Note the green curtain and compare that to the Sistine Madonna that we saw. What are these curtains that have been opened? What are they meant to represent? Certainly, this is not the Wizard of Oz. With the coming of Christ, the curtain to experiencing the spiritual world has been opened. Raphael is showing us that he can so perceive. Something in your feeling life resonates with such images, perhaps telling you that you once experienced something akin to this. In the temple, the Holy of the Holies was covered by a curtain. But when Christ died on the cross, this curtain was open, for it was rent down the middle. Here, the Madonna and Child are not upon the earth. Rather, they appear to be standing in the clouds. But when one looks more closely, one sees the clouds in the background are actually the heads of the unborn. The Duke of Weimar, Karl August, who was a friend of Goethe, said after seeing this in Dresden, "As I looked at the picture and again away from it, it always seemed to me a revelation of the soul. Even the most beautiful Caravaggios were pictures only of the human, the memory of them tangible like beautiful forms. Raphael, however, remained with me as a breath, as one of those revelations sent to one in women's form by the gods of happiness or sorrow, like a figure that arises before one again and again in waking or dream life, whose gaze, once experienced, is with one forever, day and night, moving one's innermost being." Karl August said that in 1763. So let's look a little closer. Some historians have called these baby faces putti. I disagree. Putti in the ancient classical world of art were winged infants, excuse me, who had influence on human lives. Since aging and death have to do with earthly existence, artists depicted archangels as winged lads, while even higher beings became yet younger in appearance. Perhaps we can call these heads putti, but I think Raphael was depicting the unborn. Rudolf Steiner said of this, "With supreme purity and delicacy, Raphael has breathed this mystery into form in this portrayal called the Sistine Madonna. The whole story of the evolution of humanity is contained in a most wonderful way in this picture of the Madonna." These two at the bottom of the picture definitely can be called putti, which become popular in Baroque paintings. We saw in this painting the descended Madonna and Child, where they met Tobias, whose hand the archangel Raphael extends toward them. The archangel is depicted not as a putti, but as a lad with wings. Note also the symbolic lion and the kneeling Saint Jerome with a large book, presumably the Book of Tobit, that he had translated into Latin. While Raphael was painting his Madonna with the fish, and his Sistine Madonna, he was also finishing up this similar Madonna. Here too, there is a putti on the bottom, but around the Madonna and child, these babies do not have wings. Again, I conclude these are the unborn being depicted. And if so, let's take a moment to ponder what the thought of the unborn must have meant to Raphael. We focus so much on life after death, but what about life before birth? I'll show the Sistine Madonna one more time for you to compare. We see Raphael saying, here is our origin. Each one of us, like this child, have descended from above to the earth for our earthly life. Saint Sixtus points the way to earth. Saint Barbara looks to where they go. As I said, this was painted at the time as the previous two Madonnas, namely between 1512 and 1514. This Sistine Madonna would be Raphael's last Madonna. Gazing at Raphael's Madonnas, we can forget everything that afterwards was written about the life of Jesus, for we can live entirely in this moment here portrayed. We are gazing simply at a mother and child, which, in the words of Hermann Grimm, is the great mystery to be met with in the outer world. We feel, and this is Hermann Grimm still, we feel peace surround this moment. We feel the eternal in this one moment of time. For me, this is the archetypal mother and child telling us that this love that they share is to become the love we need to share among all humans, as expressed by Christ Jesus in the words, love one another as I have loved you. After experiencing these Madonnas, many of you are asking again, differently this time, who was this extraordinary person, Raphael? We heard he was beloved by all, except by Michelangelo, for when both were in Rome, Michelangelo knew that Raphael had been a student of Perugino's, and Michelangelo had had notable verbal fights with Perugino. Thus, Michelangelo had grown distrustful of any and all painters who had been associated with Perugino. Okay, now for a difficult topic. We've seen a portrayal of the unborn. For those listening who accept the concept of reincarnation, I'm going to briefly mention Raphael's past lives as researched in the Akashic Record by Rudolf Steiner. I recognize this is perhaps too much for some listeners. Exploring past lives has often been abused. It is easy, though, to brush this topic aside. Nonetheless, it is a very serious and complicated subject for those seeking to establish a spiritual science. And for those who understand the strenuous work involved in researching the Akashic Record done by Rudolf Steiner, I will say that the one who is known as John the Evangelist was Lazarus. The raising of Lazarus was an initiation done in the way of the ancient mystery centers, where the candidate was put into a death-like state for 3.5 days. In this initiation, Lazarus, whose hierophant was Jesus Christ, so during these 3.5 days, Lazarus was guided in the spiritual world by the recently beheaded John the Baptist. When Christ called to Lazarus, "Come forth," Lazarus knew He had been born again. Like others so initiated before him, he took on a new name. And in this case, it was John. He was the disciple that the Lord loved, to whom the word agape applied. In John chapter 21, after Christ said, "Upon this rock I build my church," and Peter then asked the risen Christ, "What about him?" Pointing to John, Christ then answered, "What is it to you that I have given him a different mission than I am giving you? His mission will come later. For in our current times, Peter, humanity can grow to only philos love, but John's mission is to develop agape love. The time of John comes when hearts begin to have thoughts." So Lazarus John was the earlier incarnation of Raphael. And before Lazarus, Raphael or Lazarus was Hiram Abiff, the builder of Solomon's temple. Going in the other direction, after Raphael, this soul appears in the poet Novalis. All of these, Hiram, Lazarus, Raphael, and Novalis, all die at a young age. Only as John the Evangelist does one live to an old age. What I found truly remarkable is the change to Raphael's artistic skills, not his insights, not his imaginations, but his skills, after he comes to study under Leonardo da Vinci, which is around 1503, some say 1504. Now, Leonardo had left Florence in 1482 from Milan, and Raphael was born a year later in 1483. His father was a painter, as we said, but died when Raphael was only 11. Raphael, amazingly, took over his father's works and his studio. At 17, in the year 1500, he was studying with Perugino, who had studios, as we said, in Perugia and Umbria, as well as Florence. Perugino, being a student with Leonardo in Florence in their youth, obviously had known and worked with Leonardo. Due to the Second Italian War with France, Leonardo had fled Milan in 1499. He had arrived back in Florence in 1501. Evidently, Raphael was also enrolled in Leonardo's academy already in 1504 and may have enrolled even a year or so earlier. There, under the great master and teacher, Raphael's artistic skills were brought to perfection. On the right, we see Perugino's Marriage of the Virgin. Raphael's is on our left. We see very similar styles and painting skills, but we see Raphael has surpassed his teacher. Look at the overall composition. Then look at their feet. Steiner remarked, Raphael has grasped the mood more clearly, and yet at the same time, it is more gentle. It is not so hard. And Hermann Grimm called this a new phenomena in the whole evolution of art, for it cannot be compared with anything that had gone before. Raphael was certainly talented, as we see in this Three Kings nativity done in 1502 and completed in 1503. But his artistic skills in depicting characters will become even more exquisite. This Madonna is by Leonardo, done in 1490. While Leonardo was back in Florence from 1501 through 1506, Raphael took advantage of his presence by enrolling in his school. We do not know the exact dates. There were no records to show who was enrolled. So I've learned on the work of some art historians for this. For example, Sharon Connerly, who wrote a paper on this topic. Anyway, in 1502 and in 1503, apparently Raphael was frequently in Umbria working with Perugino. Yet he may also have been in Florence sufficiently, as we heard, to have met and then later to have begun working with Leonardo. Here we see the influence of Perugino, who was Raphael's teacher. Next, we will see what impact Leonardo had on Raphael's paintings. This Madonna and Child is already quite improved. Compare this with the previous image, the Soli Madonna. The babies' bellies are very similar, but the artistic quality has improved. This Madonna shows Raphael's skills before having them refined by studying with the master, Leonardo. Now, Raphael's style has improved dramatically. This painting has Leonardo's hand all over it, though. The sfumato, a painting style of blending the edges, is very much in Leonardo's style and not Perugino's. The perspective is fully accurate. Even the hands and feet are perfect in dimension. And the curtain has Leonardo's knot, according to Connerly's paper I mentioned. Some say this was done together, Leonardo and Raphael. Here Raphael reveals his perfected artistic skills. Who are these three children? Yesterday we saw this painting, and it is the only one by Raphael showing three holy infants. The one on the left is John the Baptist. The one in the middle is Jesus. But who is the third with the halo and golden robe? Raphael has learned from Leonardo secrets about his Virgin of the Rocks. Note the similarity of the hand and the head tilt. This Raphael painting was inspired by Leonardo's insights into early Christian theology that came to Leonardo via George Gemistus Plethon and Marsilio Ficino, as well as other members of the Accademia Platonica of Florence. That I deal with in another talk, as well as in two books I've published on this topic, but we won't have time for them here. We saw the child move about the body of the Madonna in this way, as a lemniscate or figure eight. I would like to propose the lemniscate as representing breathing. What was outside, where the world is depicted with the word violet there, becomes, as you follow the circle around and you go from the outside then to the inside of the next lobe, where it says red. In medieval times, there was a chant with the words Ave Maria. Obviously, Ave is the reflection of the word Eva. Moreover, if we add the sound Ya, the letter J, or the sound Ya, we get Jave, or Yahweh. In Greek times, after the four elements, earth, water, air, and fire, came the quintessence, the ether. To imagine this set of Greek concepts, one can use their imagination and picture a glove with a physical hand inside the glove. Now, picture the etheric, the life forces, as coming from outside the glove and penetrating the physical inside. Now, turn the glove inside out and get a sense for the spatial transformation of the etheric into the physical. It too is like a kind of breathing. So if we trace a loop of the lemniscate on its outside, we find we move to the inside in that second lobe and after the midpoint. Breathing also has this inner and outer aspects. We inhale and then exhale, and we pause briefly in between. The living earth also breathes with the seasons. She inhales late summer into autumn. She pauses at this time of year. Then she exhales in the spring all the way up to the 4th of July in America. Wherever there is ebb and flow, for example, the tides, the ancients saw a living being. For the ancients, the living earth was Mother Earth. In Genesis, we read, and he, Yahweh, breathed into Adam's nostrils, and Adam became a living soul. The breath of God caused Adam to evolve from being plant-like to being a sentient and conscious soul. Thus, breathing is to the soul what mineral is to the physical body. Here, a photographer took a photo once a week at the same time. The highest point is the summer solstice, while the lower is the winter solstice. The sun path traces out a lemniscate. Obviously, the equinox is the crossing point. The outer world becomes our inner world. Is not incarnation a kind of inhalation, and excarnation a kind of exhalation? Does our outbreath have a similar effect as the outbreath of Yahweh? What does our exhalation create? Could the exhalation of a moral person become what brings about the consciousness and ensoulment of those beings who will exist in the far future? What happens to our exhalation when one can truly say, Christ has been born in me? So now we're going to resume seeing the Madonnas again, and now try to picture this as a breathing. And Kristen will now resume playing her harp. And thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you so much. Oh, I loved having green sleeves, which is also What Child Is This? It's so fitting for these Renaissance paintings. So here again, we see the Sistine Madonna, and it inspired Novalis to write these words: revelation in the heights to God, quiet and peace through all the earth, blessed joy in men. Let me pose some leading questions as food for thought from this presentation. Can you feel the mood of Raphael's 15th century Christian imaginations? What was intended by Raphael these 500 years ago? We saw his already great artistic skills were perfected by the master. Was he also inspired by Leonardo? Where is the inner and the outer? Where is it in you? What is the inner and outer? And think of this in terms of breathing. What role does John the Baptist have where he is depicted? Rudolf Steiner expressed his appreciation for Raphael, saying, when the eyes of clairvoyant consciousness rest upon these pictures on the physical plane, and this consciousness then rises into the spiritual world, such a man realizes, although the physical is no longer seen, what I take into the spiritual world from the experience aroused by these pictures is not simply an echo of the physical. Here there is not only the rapture I experienced at the sight of them, but now for the first time, I realize all their glory. In the physical world, I merely laid the seed of what I now experience in infinitely greater majesty and splendor. When a person contemplates such pictures in which the mysteries are contained, he or she is laying the seed, but only the seed, for a greater knowledge in the spiritual world. What has made this possible? It has been made possible because that spiritual power, who was proclaimed so long in advance, actually appeared on the earth. Mankind has succeeded in unfolding a blossom in which the seed of the God of the future could ripen. Then, through the event of Golgotha, something was communicated to earth existence that man can not only take with him into the spiritual world, but that when taken into the spiritual worlds, it appears in even higher glory and sublimity. In a way, I feel what Raphael tried to tell us in his Madonnas is what Angelus Silesius would later write in these words, namely, if Christ were born in Bethlehem 1,000 times and not in thee, then art thou lost eternally. Silesius was born on Christmas Day, 1624. So we have Raphael on Good Friday, Silesius on Christmas Day. He died on the 9th of July, 1677 at the age of 52. If Christ is to be born in you, then who or what is your Madonna? This leads us to the new mysteries of love, whereas in the past such mysteries were of wisdom. Many speakers have drawn conclusions of Madonna as being Sophia, or as well as Isis. Many have experienced a mystical healing via love from meditating in front of her image. Is she the archetypic mother? Is she the earth mother? It is not the presence of Christ that we lack. What we lack is the wisdom of Christ, the Sophia of Christ. Christ will be born in our soul at the Christmas tide of our soul. We may then look forward to our soul's Easter tide, to the resurrection of the Spirit in our own inner life. We must discover true art, which springs from the Spirit. This art can only be a child of true devotion, a child of the most sacred feelings, when we feel in this context the eternal Christ festival of humanity. Then the Christ impulse can be born in the human soul. And when we so learn to experience again through a spiritual science that this Christ impulse is a reality, something which can be born in our souls as a living strength, then the Christ impulse will not remain something abstract or dogmatic. So here is Raphael's last painting that stood by his deathbed. So now we can open things up. Mary, for questions?
All right. Thank you so much, Andrew. That was really wonderful to hear and to see all these gorgeous images. So we are going to have a question and answer session now, and you can raise your hand, and then when you raise your hand, I'll call your name, and then you can unmute yourself. And we will start with Andre Golebsky. Andre, you can unmute yourself. Thank you so much.
I already did. Thank you very much, Andrew. It was fantastic. I just have one question, very simple, is why on all these paintings, nobody is happy? They're not smiling. It looks like they are, I mean, not suffering, but they're not smiling. Why aren't the Madonnas not smiling? Thank you.
I love that question, Andre. And I'd like to have you try to put yourself as a spiritual being looking down on earth today, or back in those days. And what gesture would you say would be on your face as you look down upon the problems and issues going on in the earth at that time? And I don't think you would say it's a smiling face. So I think they were being true to what the spiritual world's gestures, facial gestures, would be. I think the spiritual world looks with great earnest upon the drama of earthly life.
All right, Jenny, I will ask you to unmute next.
Oh, thank you. So actually, in the Middle Ages, only the fool was represented with a smile,
Right.
a laugh. And so it would not have been appropriate for the beloved Virgin Mary to be so represented.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Jenny. Helena Harrell, can you please unmute?
Yes, thank you. Andrew, I see all these Madonnas, they're so beautiful, and the gesture on the face of the mother is like a beholding of the baby. It reminds me of the red window at the Goetheanum, this quality of beholding. And I mean, I've never really noticed this before, but it seems that the Sistine Madonna is the only Madonna that's looking at us. Did Raphael do any other Madonnas that were gazing towards us, or was that the only one?
Oh.
I'm so wondering about that now.
Well, I might have to go through these once again to see. And I think you're absolutely right that in the ones that I showed, at least, the Madonna is very close to looking at us in the Granduca and the Cowper Madonnas, the first two, but not right eye to eye, you know? So that's a very good observation. I'll have to sort of look at that a little farther. Thank you, Helena.
Yeah, well, I want to look at it now too. It's so mysterious. Thank you. Thanks, Andrew.
Okay, thank you, Helena. And now Richard, can you unmute?
Yes. Yep. Andrew, I just have a question. I thought that John the Baptist was Elijah, John the Baptist, and comes back as Raphael, not Lazarus.
Yeah. So it gets to be a very difficult, and I say this is a very complicated and very serious topic when you look at what relationship does John the Baptist have to Lazarus, and why did Lazarus take on the name John? And I think for the audience we have, I should take that up with you, Richard, privately, okay? If you don't mind.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Richard. And now Florian has his hand up. Can you unmute, Florian?
Yes. Hi, Andrew.
Hi,
thank you very
Florian.
much for your wonderful contribution. The previous question, I just wanted to touch on it because I think it's relevant to this Holy Night period that, as the former questioner mentioned, that Rudolf Steiner generally connected the incarnations of Elijah, John the Baptist, Raphael, and Novalis. And in his very last address on the 28th of September, 1924, he gave the first of what was intended to be 2 lectures. And it ended up remaining a fragment because he was too weak to do the second part on the 29th. And when he handed the talk to Marie Steiner, I believe it was, that this shouldn't be printed until the second part was added. But Ludwig Noll, his doctor, and Ita Wegman questioned him about it. So through them, we've received some deeper insights into what he was intending to communicate, because there was some confusion there that resulted from the fact that he now suddenly mentioned this connection between Elijah and Lazarus John. And I think what makes this particularly interesting is that the lineage of John the Baptist is of the priestly stream. Both Zacharias, the father of John the Baptist, and Elizabeth were of the Levites and the Aaron lineage of the priestly stream. Whereas Lazarus, John, who had been, according to Steiner, Hiram, a Biff in his past incarnation, was this individuality who embodied the Cain stream. And the fact that these two united in this raising of Lazarus, which is often referred to as the mystery of the two Johns, is a kind of communion, in my view, of the Abel and the Cain stream, these two brothers who are a source of conflict, was healed and brought to a new communion that then continues in the later incarnations of these individualities to be carried with Hiram, Lazarus, John, through Christian Rosenkreuz into anthroposophy on the one hand, and on the other, Elijah, John the Baptist, communion with Lazarus, John, and then as Raphael and Novalis, which again flowed into anthroposophy. And that this healing impulse is very important, I feel, because these two individualities, as Rudolf Steiner indicated, that in order to bring the ancient Indian, Persian, and the Egypto-Chaldean periods to renewal, there had to be individuals who represented those periods, had to be raised from the dead. And the one that represented the Persian epoch was Lazarus John, as the kind of twin of this individuality who became the Master Jesus, who couldn't take on that mission. And that this individuality would then be preparing the sixth age, which we are now needing to prepare, where these two streams of the priestly and the kingly will more fully unite. And the fact that in the end of the foundation stone, one hears of this union of these two streams is significant for anthroposophists, because this was the renewal of the anthroposophical society where the movement and the society would unite. And so anyways, I just wanted to bring a little more clarity to those distinct streams, and that there's a kind of communion, and that through the Elijah being, there was an archangel that penetrated and was not only overlighting him, but actually incorporating in him. In the case of John the Baptist, there was an angel that incorporated in him. So the element of grace coming from above is more at work in this Abel stream. Whereas in the Cain stream, it comes from the fire beneath the earth. The son of Cain gets this hammer at the center of the earth, the golden hammer to fashion the brazen sea, etc. So these are two distinct streams, but we're running out of the grace element because we are in the consciousness soul and need to experience the ego and freedom.
Yeah.
And yet, anyways, I'll stop there.
Well, thank you, Florian, for all the detail there. I'm quite aware of it all, obviously, as you know, through the Mystech work. We've been working along all those lines. And so a lot of that I was going to tell Richard tomorrow, but we're a very public lecture here today. There may be a lot of people who are, their jaws hanging down at the moment. But thank you for clarifying that, Florian.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Florian. And now, Sandra, I see your hand up. And then I'm going to come back. I don't know if Andre and Richard have other questions or have not just taken your hand down. Sandra, do you want to unmute and ask your question? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary, and thank you, Andrew. Oh my goodness. This was a blessing just to be in this time and have these images and the piece that they offer. I live near the Washington, D.C. part of our capital, so to speak. And the National Gallery is a source of pilgrimage every now and then to see the
Yeah.
Raphael Madonnas that are there. But it's nice to see so many different paintings of his that are obviously everywhere. When I went to Dresden, I did make a pilgrimage to see the Sistine Madonna. But I wanted to, I mean, it's a silly little question, but there's in a couple of the paintings with John, there's, or even with Mary, there's a little red flower. There's one with a little, there's not much in the painting, Madonna and child, and on her left to the background, the right in the painting, is a little red flower. And then another one you see, it's as if Jesus is holding the little red flower, but it's like whether he got it from John, who gave it to him, or he's giving it to John is unclear. But it looks to be the same little red flower. And I thought, I wonder why he put that flower in there.
Mhm. Yeah, very good question. I have some possibilities, but the Aldobrandini Madonna from 1510, it looks like John has just handed him a red flower,
Right.
and it's beautiful. It's just a wonderful painting, and it does raise a question. I kind of don't want to answer it because I just have ideas, and I don't want to put ideas out there that might be not the right one. And but that's another really good one. Like, where is she looking? Does she ever look out besides the Sistine Madonna at those looking at the painting? So yeah, so Jenny has written, "Lo, how a rose is blooming." And, it does look like, a freshly picked rose flower, perhaps. So I hope that's okay, Sandra. If I don't, try to answer it, but let's leave it as a wonderful question for us to try to dig in. And does it apply to the Rosicrucians? Does
yeah, there's that. I was also in looking at them, noticing how often the child looks directly at the viewer, but the Madonna is looking mostly at the child.
Right.
Yeah. Oftentimes there's a stare from the baby that's very awake. But yeah. Thank you so much again. It was just a blessing.
Thank you, Sandra. Great question and insight.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. Now, the next person I see raising a hand is Neil Riley. Can you unmute, please?
Andrew, if I could, I'd use the word astounding for what you did.
I'm laughing for everybody else because I tease Neil all the time about using this word. But so I do a study group with Neil on Christology.
And Andrew, you did a wonderful job. And the glory of Western art, I think, it culminates in Raphael's understanding of the Madonna and the Christ. And it's really a spiritual activity, beholding this love between the mother and the child. And it's the mystery, the absolute mystery of incarnation. The word does become flesh, but only because of the love. And where would we be without Mary's yes? Steiner often shows the opposite. If we made this left turn instead of this right turn, history would have gone this way or that way. And he's brilliant at it. And he does it often with Christ. And I think Mary is in the same category. This is an amazing human being who is so worthy of our understanding. And thank you very much for presenting this and putting these images before us. They're really sacred art. They are, I'm not going to use the word astounding. They're beautiful. So thank you very much. I appreciate it, Andrew.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you so much, Neil.
May I ask, I have my hand up for so long, but maybe you don't see me.
Please, I don't.
I am Helene Burkhardt. I just
Yeah, go
like
ahead.
it now. And one picture you said here, you can see the influence of Leonardo, but I must say I didn't see it. Can you explain it to me? And the other is where the flower, the Christ child, how it's in St. Petersburg. There I saw the Raphael picture where the child has a rose. So, but my question really is, can you explain me how I can see the influence of Leonardo?
So it might take the eye of an artist who knows about this, and maybe you know, Helene, it's called sfumato, S-F-U-M-A-T-O, and it's this painting technique that Leonardo perfected. And do you know this term?
No.
Okay, that would be one of the things to see. Many of the artists would paint a sketch, and Leonardo would also, and then when they painted, they left a kind of dark outline around a person's head.
Oh.
And so when you look at the Perugino paintings, you see that in the early, and again, he goes back to it later, Raphael, this sort of style. I think he finally feels that he didn't master it. So he's, or maybe because Leonardo's not with him, he feels a little uncomfortable trying it. But there's that period there in the 1505, 06, 07 period where he is blurring those edges with the sfumato. And I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it correctly. And you can also see in the characters themselves, their proportions become more exact, more atomically correct. And the shadows are more correct under Raphael's tutelage.
Oh, that is interesting. Huh.
So Raphael was the master of realism in the paintings.
Fanny, can you repeat yourself?
So Leonardo was the master of realism,
yeah,
being depicted in the paintings.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was correct, all the way down to the details in a flower and in a leaf. They weren't just invented.
But did I understand you right? But with Raphael, the proportions of the human body got more correct. Is that with the help of Leonardo?
Yes, it becomes better proportion, more correct.
Uh-huh. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Helena. Now, oh, excuse me. Just hold on a second. Okay, sorry about that. All right, Andrea Rentia, you will be next. Can you please unmute?
Yes, good afternoon, Andrew. Thank you so much. It was very beautiful. I was very surprised at the picture of the Tobias being there. Could you say something about that picture? I was very surprised. I've never looked at it in that way.
Well, this is, it's also called Madonna of the Fish, or with the fish. And it's, what can I say? it's a picture that has the same curtain in the background behind her. And so I think by doing that, he's telling us this is connected, but now she's on the earth. She's sitting she's not standing in the clouds. Now she's sitting on a throne, but it's not much of a throne. It's a kind of wooden platform with a wooden step in front of it. And, on the one side is this Raphael as a archangel who brings Tobias the lad and to meet the child. I don't know if I can say anything more, Andrea.
No, that was very helpful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So she's come to earth now, and yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. And now David Kavish, can you please unmute?
Actually, Andrew, I suspect this is something you don't want to go into in this talk, so maybe I should just not raise the issue at this point. I just lowered my hand as I was getting called on, so I was just thinking about whether you wanted to comment on, you have this relationship in the life of Raphael with Leonardo, and then of course their previous relationship around the time that Christ comes to earth, and the fact that both of these individuals were referred to variously as the beloved of Jesus, and whether there's something more there that you wanted to say about it, but it'd probably take us too far afield for this kind of a public talk. So
yeah, I'll just say that as we heard from Florian, Steiner did have a lot to say about Raphael. Surprisingly, he doesn't have much to say about Leonardo. He speaks about Leonardo in his life, but not of previous lives. And so there have been some who have tried to take hints to come up with things, but I'm certainly not going to bring up other speculations here. But I would be happy to chat with you, David, at another time about it.
thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, David. I see Florian and Sandra both have their hands still up. You've already asked a question. Do you want to ask another one? I don't see anyone else with, oh, okay. Why don't we ask Nevenka, I don't know if I'm saying your name right, but Nevenka Perik, if you could unmute and then speak. And if Sandra and Florian want to go after that, then we'll come back to you.
Thank you, Andrew. Hi, nice to see you again. I want to say you really never fail to inspire understanding at a deeper level, and I thank you for that. I have just short comments and a question, and I happen to have seen these paintings in real view. And what I have realized is, it has been quite a while, but what I have realized is when you stand in front of this majestic art, it has an influence on one, at least it did at me and the people that I was with, that it rather takes your breath away. And there's a play of all different things, the size, the angle where you look, the colors and everything else. But then when you went to the second part, the harp was playing, and you said something about breathing, pay attention to this with respect to breathing. There was a different mode or different mood when the second time the picture showed up, and can you elaborate on that a little bit? How do you look at it from the with combination of breathing, because that was suddenly became a very subtle, at a very subtle level. These majestic, gigantic pictures were almost like brought down into from a galloping horse. It was almost like a walking horse. If
Sure, I'll
Thank
just
you.
say a couple little things here, but you know, the little things sometimes have the deepest meaning, and that is what I think Raphael was trying to do was to depict something that he, and we might say, breathed in. So as a sensory experience, we might say is breathed in. He breathed in these images of the spiritual world, and then he exhaled them, you might say, into his paintings. And in so doing, you know, this was over a 15 year period, even a few more than that, but yeah, about a 15-year period that he's painting these. And I didn't put them in a chronological order. I put them in the order so you can follow this figure 8 going around. And I did that to sort of show an outward meaning, but to inspire in you this inner breathing. So I hope that's enough. I don't want to, you know, bring about too much of a pedantic picture of this. And oh my, I'm having an absolutely brilliant sunset going on outside right now.
Thank you, that's perfect.
So
Thank you so much. And, you know, I actually had a question for you, Andrew. I was wondering if Rudolf Steiner ever said anything about, did Raphael have any awareness of his prior incarnations? And one of the reasons I'm asking is because I think in the fifth gospel, there was something about John at a certain point, maybe during the Pentecost, when he lifted himself up, almost like he was raised up into the spiritual world and was able to see what some of the other apostles were not able to see. And it's reflected in Raphael's paintings, his view into the spiritual world. And I just was curious whether, I mean, what did Raphael have awareness of his past lives? It begs the question, did Novalis?
well, I'm going to tell you, I've read a lot. I haven't seen it said Raphael knew of his past lives expressly, but it's certainly implied with some of the things that he is saying, that Raphael had a much higher gift than most of being able to know of who he was in the past and what his mission was for each of his lifetimes as Novalis or as Raphael. He certainly, according to Steiner, you know, you would say he knew what his mission was.
Great, thank you. Now I see that Sandra is asking a question. Can you say a little more about Mystech?
And it's spelled M-Y-S capital T-E-C-H. And Mystech's role is to, well, I'll give it two roles. One is Steiner talked about how in the future a mechanical occultism must come about, and it will come about in two ways. One, by those seeking to do so out of an egotism or out of a group egotism. And the second way would be out of a spiritual science, which would be out of a selfless motive. And both may seem to operate similarly, but the effects of each will be very different, and one in a positive way for human evolution and one in a negative way for human evolution. And he pointed directly to the Americas for where this best can be implemented in the right way. And so Mystech is trying to do that. The other aspect of this is within anthroposophy, there was a tremendous fear about technology. I think as you look at what Steiner had to say about technology, he was trying to get us to not fear it. And so Mystech's other goal is to help spiritual science come to a disposition where it's not fearing what technology is bringing. And I guess there's a third goal, which is to help us find the counterbalances as technology moves forward. What is the needed counterbalance? And we have that on the agenda. So there's study groups that happen and the second week of January. So if you just look for mystech.org, you can find out a lot more. Annual conferences. We'll be having our 5th annual conference in August, mid-August. And you're all welcome to come.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrew. Now, Florian, I'm going to come back to you. You still have your hand up, so you're welcome to ask another question. Thank you.
I recall Rudolf Steiner speaking of how the 3 great Renaissance artists, Leonardo, Raphael, Michelangelo, embody this trinity of thinking, feeling, and willing at the dawn of the consciousness soul, so that Leonardo brings more of the quality of thinking through his art, and Michelangelo, this power of the will that's embodied in his David and so many of his sculptures. And then the great task of his painting as well, up there in the ceiling of the Sistine Madonna. And Raphael is then in the middle, representing the feeling life and the heart forces. And I think what flows through, especially the Madonna pictures, is this whole mission of the earth, that the Maria is sort of incorporating the Sophia being, who's epitomizes the mission of the earth to transform wisdom, the planet of wisdom, into the future planet of love. So this love aspect, that is the mission of the whole earth, that of course the Christ being through the mystery of Golgotha gave the most important impulse. We see the mother and the child, but the other pole is the mother beneath the cross, the mother in the Pietà, the mother suffering the birth of what will become the New Jerusalem, the Golden City, the shining earth of the future that dawned on Golgotha. And I think this love quality is suffusing these paintings with the selflessness of this being who embodies wisdom and love in a way that's blended in a perfect and beautiful way.
And Florian, I appreciate what you're bringing, and I'm wondering, do you know, did he say something similar about Bach, Mozart, and Beethoven? Again, the thinking, feeling, and willing for music.
I haven't come across that, but that would be interesting.
Great. Thank you so much, Florian. Okay, so we have a question now from George. And George, can you unmute, please?
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you very much, Andrew, for an excellent talk and wonderful paintings to look at. This is more of a sort of observation that or remembrance I had when I was looking at these paintings, because I remember reading that a poet once said, at least unfortunately I can't remember the name of the poet, but a poet once made the observation that when a woman becomes a mother, she remembers what paradise was like.
Huh.
So you could say that what Raphael is painting for us is a glimpse into this paradise, a glimpse into a state of selfless love and sacrifice.
Beautiful.
And it was quite an observation, wasn't it? I remember Joseph Campbell. I don't know if you've read much of Joseph Campbell, but in one of his books, he starts off with a photograph of a child and mother and says that this is the state we all want to get back to. The state that we should be.
Yeah, thank you, George. That's great, great additions.
Thank you so much, George. Does anyone else have any questions? I don't see any more hands up. I'm going through, and it looks like there are no more questions, and maybe no more questions. Now, Florian, your hand is still up. I don't know if you...
I didn't intend that, but the one thing I wanted to mention was that Rudolf Steiner indicated that Raphael was painting out of a memory of his past incarnation as John the Baptist. And in those paintings that you presented, the ones that included John the Baptist, that the Maria being was always gazing at John the Baptist in a very loving way that kind of is that a signature of that experience.
Right. Okay.
Thank you, Florian. Andrew, do you have anything else you want to add, or?
No, I just want to wish everyone for the rest of these wonderful holy nights and for what we're doing here with Chicago, a lot of blessings and many wonderful inspirations.
Okay, so I'm going to jump back on here for a second and say thank you to everyone for joining us. It's been wonderful for me to actually hear these presentations. I haven't heard every single one of them, but it's been an incredible lineup, and we have a few more days left.
Right.
So I do hope that you'll jump on and join us for over the next few days. And I also know that these are all being recorded, so that if you want to go back and look at them, you're welcome to do that as well. So thank you all for joining us today. And if you all want to, as we end the meeting, if you want to unmute and say hello to each other, I hope that we can work through some of these issues that we had initially with Zoom bombing and get everyone to be able to see each other, because I know we all miss seeing each other in person, but you're welcome to unmute and say hello to each other. And thank you so much, and Happy New Year.